Chapter 4. Let the wind guide me. Just as I started to accommodate myself with this new layer that I have fallen into, I heard a loud rumble from the layer above. What's going on? I asked myself. But before I could think of an answer, a strong gust of wind knocked me down. Ah! I yelled as I quickly tried to claw myself back onto the ground I was standing on. But it did not help me as I was still falling. I tried to fly, but once again I was unable due to the air and my hurt wing. I soon fell onto a grassy slope to then roll down it until I hit a rocky wall. As I got up and looked around, I saw that I was on a grassy slope. It was steep, but one I can still walk up. I walked up to the edge. I looked around and saw more and more of these slopes, all with sharp edges and rocky interiors. There was no flat ground as far as I could see. I looked up and noticed that the black ceiling I fell through couldn't be seen. Instead I could see a bright blue sky. I once again saw large white pillars, but now in spiral shapes. The area was seemingly lit by nothing. It all felt so strange. I soon realized that climbing up this slope was a bad idea as soon as I felt a gentle breeze on my wingtips. Another gust of wind is coming, I thought to myself. I quickly ran down the slope so I wouldn't be blown off the cliff again, but as I was running down, I got blown off to the side and onto another slope. What just? I asked myself. The direction of the wind just changed. I observed. It had to have changed. I was blown off once and now I was blown off to the side. My eyes then turned to the spiral pillars. Were they spinning? I asked myself. My train of thought was abruptly ended by yet another light breeze, coming from the same direction as before. I tried to prepare myself by facing up the slope. Even with that I still got knocked over into the dirt when it passed. I need to find the way out, like before with the hole in the ground. With no other way to go, I decided that I will let the wind guide me. I treaded up the slope and looked around. Almost all of the slopes were the same size and the same square shape, all in varying shades of green, and what almost looked like blue. The white spirals had almost no pattern in where they were laid out, except that it was always in the middle of the slopes. As I expected, I felt another light breeze, forward this time. I quickly jumped down the edge of the slope I was on as the bottom was not too far down on this one. I hid myself against the rock and, just as I had hoped, the wind did not affect me and I was able to continue on. As I went along, I saw the variety of steepness of the slopes. Some were much steeper than others, but none of them were anywhere near flat. I tried my best to avoid the steeper ones as I could easily get stuck in them. I felt another breeze. This time it was to my left. I did my best to try and find a safe place to hide as the gust of wind approached. It was much harder as the slopes got progressively steeper the farther I went. I was able to find a place and continued toward the direction of the wind. I was not sure where it was taking me, but I had nowhere else to go. The farther I went, the fewer of the spinning spirals I saw, most likely due to the increasing steepness of the slopes. I began to wonder if I was wrong to follow the wind. This worry soon faded as I saw, far off into the distance, more of the spirals, all packed close together. I felt that this was the place I needed to go to. I need to get over there, I thought to myself. The wind agreed as I soon felt a small breeze toward the spirals. I slid down the slope and waited for the wind to pass. I quickly started toward the cluster of spirals as soon as it subsided, though it was much harder than it was before as the slopes were becoming dangerously steep. I definitely wouldn't be able to climb out if I were to fall into some of them. I was hoping it would be easy to avoid them, but I felt another light breeze much sooner than I had expected. I panicked and nearly fell into one of the slope pits. I was able to save myself before I fell in and was able to get to a safe place. I got back up to again jump from slope to slope, now getting closer to the spiral cluster. I only just noticed that, unlike the spirals from before, these were not spinning at all. Now I was sure they were the way out of here. The wind soon agreed as I felt another breeze toward the unmoving spirals. For some reason, I did not feel like hiding this time. I wanted to spread my wings and ride the wind, so I spread my wings out, making sure my wing is heeled enough, angled them, and did my best to prepare myself for the upcoming gust of wind. The moment right before the gust of wind felt like an eternity. It eventually ended and I was quickly shot forward into the air. Thankfully, my previously hurt wing wasn't holding me back and I was able to soar as expected, though I was barely able to keep myself stable in the air. I seem to have forgotten how strong these gusts were, as it looks to me as if I might pass the spirals at the speed I'm going. This became more and more apparent as I got closer to them. If I were to aim down now to try and land, I might spiral out of control. I had to try and steer myself in this strong wind. Hopefully I will latch onto a spiral. I slightly tilted my wings, and slowly tried to veer myself to the left. I soon regretted this as I was now heading straight toward the spiral. Once again I underestimated my speed. I held out my claws, hoping to catch myself onto the spiral. The gust itself has ended, so I should hopefully be able to slow myself down on it. This almost worked, but I didn't fully realize the size of these spirals. I desperately tried to claw myself onto the spiral, but I mostly just slipped off. I eventually was able to get a good grip on it and was able to slide down onto the flat ground below. I couldn't have been more happy that it had worked. I have finally reached the spirals, but I now need to get down. I looked around and saw what looked like 9 slopes worth of flat ground in the shape of a square, with the unmoving spirals on each corner. I quickly went toward the center as there had to be something there, and I was right. There was another hole, now in the shape of a square. I was hesitant to jump in at first because of the last hole, but this time, I would be falling onto soft grass instead of the hard rock of the layer above. I jumped in and as I expected, I was thrown back by the blast of air from the hole. I was right about the wind. I looked over to the spirals on the corners. I have to do exactly what I did before, but I don't know if I will be able to grab onto them again, so this time I will climb them. The spirals were as slippery as ever, but I was still able to grab onto them. The spirals weren't too steep, so it was no problem climbing up them. I wasn't sure how high up they went, but I decided not to find out when I eventually got to a height I thought would be good to jump down from. I readied myself for the jump just like before. Due to the curvature of the spiral, I was afraid I may not get as far as I hoped. I suppressed these thoughts and jumped down from the spiral and straight into the hole. I went straight in, just as I had hoped to. The wind slowed me down but once again, failed to stop me. I was expecting to land myself in another layer soon after I surpassed the wind, but I was falling down the hole much longer than before. I wasn't even sure there was any wind trying to pull me up anymore. I just continued falling. As I continued falling, I started to think I may not even be in a hole anymore. There didn't seem to be any walls. There didn't seem to be anything. There was nothing. I was stuck in the void. Until I looked behind me. I saw lights, hundreds of them, thousands even. They were all surrounding what looked like even more of those white pillars. I angled my wings to try gliding toward them. It seemed like I was able to fly again, so I flapped my wings to keep myself up. There truly were thousands of lights, and hundreds of the white pillars, but many of them had very sharp angles and edges. I flew over on the edge of the wall of lights to find somewhere safer to fly into. Everywhere I looked, the pillars were sharp and intimidating. I had no choice but to fly straight into the mess. I once again had no way of knowing where to go, and this time the wind seems to be completely absent. I will just have to fly and hope I am able to find a way out. Doing that was easier said than done, as it was very hard to avoid the sharp edge and spiraling shapes of the surrounding pillars. Some were very close together and were impossible to dodge. So I had to fly another way. I started to notice a pattern in some of the pillars. Many of them were leading into the same direction. With no wind to guide me, I will follow the pillars. I found that I bumped into almost no dead ends that I had to avoid before when I followed the pillars. All I have to avoid now is the sudden sharp turns and spikes of some of the pillars. As I kept flying, I've noticed that I've been gradually getting faster. Could it be that I've gotten better at flying, or is it more wind? I didn't want to find out because there was a chance I could crash if I stopped, so I just went along with it and kept flying. Even after the turns I took, I kept accelerating. I now had to focus all my energy on not bumping into anything. With the speed I was going at now, I was scared to know what could happen to me if I did crash. Thankfully there was less to avoid the farther I went along. All of the pillars now are all converging seemingly into one place. I knew I had to be going the right way. Now flying at an extremely fast speed, I tried to steer myself right where everything was converging. At some point, all the pillars went straight down. I saw no lights beneath them, but I did see what looked like 10 of them in a circle. This has to be it. I thought to myself, I just need to go inside. I was able to dodge everything even with all the speed in the world, and delved directly into the ring of pillars. I felt myself slowing down, but I was going too fast to stop. I was soon in complete darkness once again as I fell down. I closed my eyes just for a second, and when I opened them, I found myself somewhere completely different. I didn't even feel myself stopping as I found myself here. I got up and saw that I was in a field of grass. I saw the trees around me, the wind blowing through the leaves, the sky sparkling with stars. It was all so beautiful. Is this even the same world as I was just in? I asked myself. Before I could take in the beauty of this scenery any longer, a small white flower caught my eye at the edge of a cliff. I walked closer as if it was calling me. A jolt of realization ran through me. The Elysium flower, I said quietly to myself.